Hey, ladies, everyone can hear me. Thank you, Chris.
Hey, how are you?
Hello.
Doing well. You guys, I'm way too excited to chat with you. So sorry if I'm too enthusiastic at this point.
No
But
such thing.
super excited to have you guys on. I know it's a long time coming, for sure. To reintroduce myself, though, to the brand innovators audience out there, I'm Tiffany. I'm on the partnerships team at Influential. We showcase and specializing in showcasing the effectiveness of influencer campaigns by tracking attribution, like sales inside Target and Walmart, foot traffic, you name it. And today I'm talking with two awesome women underneath the Unilever umbrella who touch multiple areas on brand teams if thinking about, marketing, innovation, purpose, all of those things that are fine and good. And if you guys definitely want to look and stalk them like I have on LinkedIn or check out their bios on the Brand Innovator site, please do so. But yeah, excited to have you guys here. Hope you're healthy, COVID negative, or vaccinated if you're lucky. Love all of those things. So yeah, thank you for being here. I do want to kick this off and chat a little bit about where we are and sort of like where we've come since the last year, which felt like perhaps even, technically the last decade. Um, Tell us a little bit about how your roles might have shifted or maybe adjusted to the times. Anything that's been sort of like a change since the last year in what you're focusing on in your specific respective brand teams. Eden, do you wanna kick us off?
Sure. Thanks, Tiffany. So for me on the SheaMoisture brand, what we realized is as we serve this kind of, multicultural consumer, when the stay-at-home orders kind of came in, we noticed that we had a huge influx in sales. People were kind of forced to do their hair at home and really think about wellness, self-care, and, having to really think about, they didn't have access to hair salons anymore. And so for us, one of two things happened. The first was that we saw a huge increase in sales, which was super hard to navigate, obviously, given COVID. We had to make sure that our manufacturing plan, supply chain, getting, stock to the store. There was a lot of work that was done by the team there. And then secondly, we do primarily market on digital. So a lot of our digital marketing efforts, though, also had to shift during that time. So we launched a campaign called At Home with Shea, where we really tried to provide tips and tutorials to consumers that were now, forced to do their hair at home. So I would say those were the two like major shifts that happened for us in 2020.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that, at least from a consumer perspective, experimenting, playing with YouTube, playing with products and understanding what brands were, putting out in market and talking about just based on where we are and what was shut down, I think was super helpful. What about you, Erin?
So I think the buzzword from my team has been pivot. We're like, if we hear that word pivot one more time, but 2020, all jokes aside, it really was the year of the pivot. So I think a lot of brand teams, like we're already talking about what we're going to be doing in 2022. We usually are 1, 2, 3 years ahead where we're making plans on how we want to communicate. And I think what was really exciting was we really had to take a step back from what we had planned for the year and talk about, does this make sense? Does this make sense to be airing right now? Is this culturally relevant? Everything from like, now you no longer have people wearing masks or socially distanced in communication. And so I think for me, what was really exciting was just being on the Dove master brand team, figuring out how we could quickly respond to what was happening around us. So one example, and I encourage everyone to Google if they haven't seen it, is a campaign from Dove called Courage is Beautiful. Um, that was done in record time. I think in about a week or 2 weeks, that campaign was put together. It wasn't on the docket. It wasn't something that we were planning on, but it was all around highlighting frontline workers, and really the beauty behind the courage that they were displaying, for the U.S. and the nation. And so I think that was an example of what we had planned to launch in maybe the first half of the year was very, very different than what we did. And we had to be comfortable with things not looking polished and perfect. And the way, the campaign that we ran was very simple. It was selfies and images that we found online of these different nurses showing the mask signs from hours and hours at work. And we found that that was really impactful, because it was responding to culture at the moment. So I think for us, the big shift throughout the year was not only first for COVID, then we were like, we had all these plans for the second half of the year. And then with all the Black Lives Matter protests, we then came out with another campaign called America the Beautiful, again, responding to what was happening. And so I think while we traditionally have very set brand campaigns and tentpole moments that we've been planning, we really had to take a step back and reimagine what made sense for Dove given everything that was going on.
That is so interesting and I think refreshing to also hear because you hear this from D2C brands who are smaller, more nimble, can, adjust to the times really quickly. You don't always hear it so, impactfully because we can look back and say that that was definitely something that needed to happen from the larger Unilever and its brand teams. And it worked. And it was, not tone deaf in a lot of ways. To see that from such a global leader, I think is really impressive. It just goes to show you guys are awesome leaders, just being, on your team and being able to be part of those conversations. I want to talk a little bit about, I know, Eden, you, thinking about SheaMoisture, huge player in its commitment to supporting small businesses that struggled during the pandemic, specifically the Community Commerce Fund. Do you want to touch a little bit about what that was and then what that means moving forward for consumers and small businesses?
Yeah, so similar to Dove, when we had, the racial protests and everything happening in the summer of 2020, we also felt like a huge commitment to support Black-owned businesses. And they were the most impacted by COVID for several reasons, and they also weren't getting a lot of the government funding. And so we actually committed $1 million to support Black-owned businesses during this time through a combination of grants as well as providing, webinars and other kind of services to help them think about how they can come back stronger after COVID ends, which is still yet to be determined as we continue to go through this pandemic. But I think that for us, it was reinvigorating our community commerce fund, which we've always supported. Black women entrepreneurs who are who get the least amount of VC funding, but who are the highest rate of entrepreneurs in the U.S. And so I think it was great because we were really able to support our community and really spotlight them. We also did a campaign where we had different Black-owned businesses spotlighted every Friday throughout the year. So we really talked about, getting our consumers to go and purchase Black-owned, which I know was another kind of indirect movement that happened after all this was really, buy Black. And so we wanted to support that as well.
That's awesome to hear. Huge fan. Definitely necessary. I saw a lot of brands immediately after that was announced kind of follow in those footsteps. And if that needs to happen, create a snowball effect, like I'm all for it. You know what I mean? So props to you guys for that. Same thing with Erin on your side and thinking about the Crown Act, which actually has been around for some time now. Tell us a little bit about what that means and what you're doing to kind of like evangelize that, if that's a good way to say it, throughout at least the US.
Yep. So I will say I was pretty proud of Dove that this wasn't just something that was just a response to everything that was happening and really something that we had been, to be quite honest, quietly championed before this past year. I'm really trying to do the do before we start promoting the work. But for those who aren't familiar, CROWN, which stands for Creating a Respectful and Open World for Natural Hair, is all about advancing legislation that makes race-based hair discrimination illegal. So right now in the US, there's been countless examples of young men, children, women who have been either expelled from school, told that they can't graduate, a number of different things because of hairstyles inherent to the Black community. So one example is there was, again, if you guys haven't heard of the story, I'd encourage you to Google, his name's DeAndre Arnold. He was told that he could not graduate unless he got rid of and cut his locks. And so one thing that Dove did was we actually sent him to the Oscars and had a really big PR moment to say, while your school might not think you're fit for graduation, we think that you're more than fit just the way you are for the Oscars, the red carpet, and anywhere you want to show up. But really what we're doing is trying to make it so that the Crown Act is passed in law nationwide. Right now it's passed in 7 states. And we really are, this is not just kind of like a one-off campaign, but we are really committed to championing this until this is no longer a conversation. It's crazy that we still need to talk about this. And just really excited for the momentum. we started something this year called Crown Day, which we celebrated on July 3rd. And this is going to be something that we are going to make an annual holiday to continue to raise not only awareness around the Crown Act, but also, flood everyone's Instagram, social media, everything with beautiful Black hair so that people realize that, this is something that's beautiful and isn't something that you should be told that you need to change in order to fit in.
I love that. It's like emotional a little bit thinking about it because it seems it's kind of mind blowing. You just kind of talking about what happened. It's just unheard of. Thankfully, I think for me, but yeah, super happy to know that you guys are in a place to actually make a change like that, and can't wait to do things like go to the Oscars and make big splashy PR moments again. Let's talk a little bit more about innovation. So, like thinking about hair and the beauty consumer from a global lens, from home base. What does that look like for you and your teams? Maybe specifically, Eden, do you want to start? I know that you're working across the world. I don't know if you're traveling as much, but what does innovation look like for your team?
Yeah, so unfortunately, no travel for the past year, but it's actually been a nice break for once. So yeah, the way that we think about innovation in terms of hair and beauty is quite interesting. I would say everybody wants to feel like a product is made for them or kind of, creates results that are meaningful. But I also think that a lot more brands, consumers are looking to brands to be more purposeful and really standing for something as well. So I think what's great is that, all of our Unilever brands have a purpose and we all stand behind something. We communicate that pretty actively, through our marketing. And I think in terms of innovation, what's interesting is while, we serve different consumers globally, they're still all kind of looking for that same thing. And we still are focused on that underserved consumer. So in the US, that underserved consumer was the African American consumer. In Mexico, I tell people like the underserved consumer is the curly hair consumer because most people have straight hair. So who's underserved could look very different globally, but we're still focused on that underserved kind of consumer and making them feel beautiful, making them feel like they're the norm and that they're not an outlier or have to conform to whatever the norm is in their market. I also think that innovation will continue to kind of change as we stay at home. I think that more people are going to feel more comfortable taking care of their hair and have more at-home beauty routines. So we continue to innovate around, what that looks like. So we'll also see a lot more in terms of like the wellness space, really focus around like self-care and products that go hand in hand with that versus only, the traditional kind of wash and care or styling products that we've seen in the past.
I love that. I'll ask maybe later if there's anything you can give away, like what's to launch maybe this year. Can't wait. Just gonna say that. Erin, what about for you and your team? What does innovation look like for you guys? I know you were doing a lot for. Well, I'll let you say it.
No, I mean, I think Erin like hit every single key point. So really would just echo what she's saying. And I think we're seeing this across categories. So whether it's hair care or something, I think a lot of times the trends you see around skin and makeup all kind of lend itself to other categories. So people are at home, they're not spending as much time on maybe makeup, but they're very focused on caring for their health of their skin. So I think the same is what we're seeing with hair. Maybe, and again, I think it depends on whether you're looking at the Black consumer versus general market. But people are really investing because they have the time, because you have to be at home, because you can't do as much. Those self-care rituals matter more now than ever. So taking, maybe before we didn't have the time for the 15-minute mask. We see more people doing that, more DIY, more customization. I think people are really taking advantage of their time at home. And so the innovations that we're looking into are also leaning into that space around, that self-care and pampering.
Yeah, that I mean, totally aligned. It makes me think about the research component, of course. I'm curious to know from both of you guys, how important is research? I know it's important thinking about your consumer, but what does that process look like in even just analyzing, consumer sentiment on social, or maybe what you're hearing from, any events or broadcasts that you guys put out in a different marketing funnel? How important is research, and what does that look like? Either one.
Yeah, so I can answer that question first. I know that we work really closely with our like CMI team, our consumer insights team. So for us, as a global brand, as we launch in new markets, SheaMoisture is pretty much established in the US, but we're still expanding in different markets. It's very important to us that not only our portfolio will do well in market, but that our communication and marketing will also stand out and do well in market. So we've actually done a lot of consumer research and a lot of testing. We do both qualitative testing as well as quantitative testing via, surveys and online tools. We also will do interviews with consumers and market just to really understand who they are, what are their, purchasing behaviors, what products are they looking for, have they heard of the brand, what are their sentiments, or what other products are they using, which could be competitors. And we really try to understand, who that consumer is and try to really encapsulate, their personality into kind of like a consumer demographic. And so it's been really interesting as we do a lot of that work this year. So, we've launched in Europe, we're looking to launch in certain countries in Latin America. And I think like the consumer is very different globally, as I mentioned earlier, from an assortment and what they're looking for, but also from a marketing perspective and what's important to them in that market, right? The US could be further along on some things, but could be, behind on other things. So like, what are the kind of, geopolitical kind of social issues that are happening in market are also super important because we want to be top of mind and culturally relevant. So for us, research is super important. We do research even when we want to launch an ad that was in the US. We make sure to adapt it to the local market and test it as well before we launch it. So it's not just a copy and paste for us. And so we leverage our teams really well and look at that data before putting anything out there.
I love that. That's super interesting to hear. Same thing for you, Erin. I know you even mentioned you were part of developing the Amplified Textures line. I'm sure that's all research.
One of the things that I do love about Unilever, and whether that's Shea or Dove, is just the resources that we have at hand around testing. So just working, for example, your example around launching Amplified Textures, every step of the way we were checking in with consumers, validating even like the initial idea, all the way down to packaging. So it really is that art and science. So for example, we had several different packaging concepts, and then we go and we find, whoever that consumer is, whether it's, a certain general market, AA, but we took those. So for Amplified Textures, just to give a very specific example, we took those pack designs, we had a couple different routes, and then we tested it with that end consumer to make sure not only does the packaging resonate, the product, the proposition. It's very important that every step of the way we were testing. And then I think for Amplified Textures in particular, it was even more important. I think Shea has the benefit of really having the credibility, I'd say, with the Black community. They initially were created by a Black CEO family, the roots tied back to Africa, whereas Dove, unfortunately, is seen as a general market brand. So for us, really, really making sure that what we created was going to be something that was going to resonate was important. So even in the very beginning, we had a number of workshops where we brought in editors, beauty junkies, a number of real women, Black consumers to get their opinion. So some of the things we heard, for example, were, every general market brand just wants to slap gold onto a package and call it, for textured hair. Like we don't just need gold packaging. Show us something different. Show us something beautiful. So not only were we doing the qualitative, but also the quantitative research to make sure we were creating a mix that really was going to be something that the Black community loved aesthetically, but also making sure that the products work. So again, testing the products with R&D to make sure that the end benefit was really going to deliver on what we said.
That's so interesting. I'd love to be in like the war room, just a fly on the wall, like seeing.
We'll add you. We have some more coming up. So.
Put me on your cell phone, like in the back. It's interesting too because there's a woman, CMO of Nestle Waters, who was on earlier, and she mentioned how personal water bottle packaging is. Like you're putting it to your face and mouth and like enjoying it, all day. In some cases for hopefully a lot of us, but same thing goes for hair and products. I feel like any personal care products in general, like I want to make sure like I feel good using it. It comes out nicely, if it's aesthetically pleasing as well for my bathroom, like even better. So that's super interesting to hear that. Want to shift a little bit and talk about digital. I'm curious to know if your approach to digital has, I assume it's increased given COVID and kind of what your efforts are in that regard. But can you tell us about how that's changed or evolved or what the purpose and role of digital is for you guys? Eden?
Yeah, sure. So we primarily do focus on digital for SheaMoisture. So I would say while it's increased, it won't be maybe it's a huge increase because we haven't launched TV in like the past 3 years, for example, and just launched like a TV ad, I would say at the end of 2020 after doing a lot of research and really thinking about it. And so while our ad spend and our media spend around digital has really increased, we also get a lot of earned and organic kind of posts and engagement as well, which is like great for the brand. I think that we put out a lot more content. So from a content perspective, I do feel like we've kind of increased what that content is and what it looks like. So we did a ton of like virtual series, for example. So, we're very experiential at SheaMoisture. We used to do a ton of events, and obviously we couldn't do that in 2020. So we moved those to being virtual and kind of leading these like, virtual events for anyone to join, which I think was great because you're limited when you have an event, obviously in person. Only people from that locale or that have traveled there can come there. But being on the global team, I love the fact that we had virtual events because I could now invite all of my consumers globally to kind of join and really kind of understand like the SheaMoisture brand a little bit more and really kind of like get to know like the US teams and like hear from US influencers and partners that we were working with. So I think in some ways it definitely expanded the scope of our brand and really got that awareness to be higher just because we were able to really scale our marketing differently because we were spending a lot more on digital and doing different things on digital. But in other ways, I think that it was in the large part more of the same because we were such a digital first brand and that we spend so much of our marketing on digital even pre-COVID.
Yeah, that's interesting. Of course, like from an internal capacity, but also thinking about global consumers, like how that I think that that's impressive. Same thing for you, Erin, I assume,
Yeah, so I think for us,
thinking about digital.
I think for us, we've been thinking a lot about what does it mean. I don't know if you guys can. Is it breaking up?
No, I
What
have
what
you.
is
I
it?
have you.
What does it mean to be agile? So I think again, things like TV campaigns, these super polished digital videos, like we've always been doing that. But a lot of one thing that I think has changed is how can we get away from things not being perfect but good enough, and really making sure that we're responding to culturally relevant moments. So looking at agility, whether that's Twitter or Instagram, to really capitalize on moments is something that we are trying to get better at. A brand like Dove does have a lot of guardrails in place, so trying to figure out how do we use digital as a way to kind of be ahead and responding to things in the right moment, but also making sure it's on brand. So I think for us, it's really been a tool around agility. I also think, kind of to Eden's point around people being at home, having more events. I think Crown Day, I was blown away. Again, Crown Day was supposed to happen at Essence. It was supposed to be in person. We pivoted that idea multiple times, from COVID to Black Lives Matter to so many things impacted those plans. If I told you it almost didn't even happen the week before, just because of a number of a number of things that we had to jump through. But again, we had over 40,000 participants throughout the day. The number of women who were engaged, I think, if you put things out there digitally, if people can relate to the content, if they like the speakers, if it's something that they want to share, for us, it really became a viral moment. And that's all thanks to digital. So we had
Yeah.
celebrities like Gabrielle Union tweeting about this. We had Tracy Ellis Ross, even Kamala Harris wrote Happy Crown Day. So I think digital has also been a great way to really get the word out, and help spread awareness around the different efforts that we've had for the brand.
Can't wait. We have less than 6 months. Can't wait. Do that again. I want to talk a little bit more personally about how you guys are working with your teams. Of course, playing in the through line of thinking digitally, have things been more collaborative? What is that process like to still churn out amazing initiatives and, awareness of certain movements that you guys are doing and still working within the confines of your home and apartments?
Yeah, so go ahead, Erin.
No, I mean, I feel like I've heard mixed things from colleagues. I personally love the working from home. Like I'm like, I don't know if I'm gonna have the social skills for when I go back in the office. At Unilever, I would say we've always had a flexible work environment. So every single Friday pre-COVID, everyone for the most part worked from home. Like when you come into the office, you could, but it was very, very empty. And again, if you had to work from home a couple of days a week, it was never a big deal. Um, Surprisingly, I laugh because now I'm like, oh my God, I always have to have my camera on for all these work meetings. And we never turned, like we would work from home on Fridays and we would never turn our cameras on. There's so many people and partners, like again, we have a huge Dove team in London where I never even knew. It's crazy to think like I kind of knew what they look like from maybe their LinkedIn photo or the one image on Teams, but now everyone's turning on their camera. And while I joke that sometimes I'd rather, we not, it has allowed me to feel a lot more connected to some of my teammates globally. And I also think it's easier to get time on people's calendars. So if you want to find 15, 20 minutes to chat, it's the hurdle isn't there as much around making time because people don't have to shuffle and go back from conference room to conference room. But I've actually felt like I've gotten closer to certain colleagues by working from home, especially some of our colleagues overseas.
Same. And to speak of your like social element, that's what this is for.
Yeah.
Helps us practice being social. But yeah, I totally hear your sentiment. What about you, Eden?
Yeah, so I mean, I would echo Erin's sentiments as well. I also think that it helps because you just get a lot more like family life involvement. So you're now hearing about parents and kids and like other kind of issues that you wouldn't normally kind of present when you were like going into the office in the workday. I think that a lot of people were very confined, and I think that now we have a much better picture of people. I've definitely noticed that I've been a lot more authentic, and I don't know if it's like COVID or like Black Lives Matter or all these things kind of all together, but I think that like in general, employees I feel like are being treated more humanely, which I think is actually great, and I hope it continues. But I think I had the opposite kind of effect in terms of having more meetings because we weren't shuffling from conference room to conference
That's
room, because
true.
I wasn't traveling, because I wasn't doing much. It was like any time on my calendar that was open was getting filled by somebody somewhere. And globally, that means like early mornings, late nights, working on some holidays. So I think like that was very much in the beginning. I think now it's kind of slowed down because people realize like, okay, just because you're at home and available to meet all the time, but you still have like work to do, so you can't just be in meetings all day. It's slowed down a bit, but in the beginning, I was like, I honestly had like more meetings than I did pre-COVID, and it was taking up a lot of my time. So yeah, I think there are definitely pros and cons. I'm also like not sure what's going to happen if and when we ever go back to the office, but it'll definitely be interesting to see. And I'm just glad that we've gotten to know our colleagues much better, so you can now feel more comfortable like taking those days off when you need them, or saying that you have a family emergency to attend to. So yeah.
Yeah, I think I have like photos first week working from home. And it's not like we haven't worked from home, but just for such an extended amount of time, I was wearing jeans, I was buttoned up, here, ready at my desk. And then it got to, I'm wearing a blanket. I'm really like, it's cold outside. We're still working though. And then to your point on, yes, back-to-back meetings, like I see you have a 5 minute gap, people are in there scheduling it for sure. So I love a cushion a little bit. We still have to get up, get water, walk around and stuff. So it's been interesting to navigate. How are you guys balancing sort of, to speak a little bit about that, work and professional life? What do you do to kind of turn off or escape, and what's that look like?
So I will say it's been hard. I think because you're home, kind of to our point before, everyone expects you to be available 24/7. So I think I'm trying to get better. It's a work in progress. I'm still not good at it, but one of my goals for this year is to be better at setting boundaries. So one thing that I actually did, I have a coworker, her name's Alyssa. She like religiously wakes up every day at 5 a.m. Like she always does it. And she's all about her alone time in the morning. So she actually started, you can look at our hashtag, it's called the Alyssa Effect. She started this 5 a.m. challenge that a group of us have been doing. I mean, I've been struggling with it, but for the last 21 days, and it's all around creating routine and rituals for yourself in the morning. So whether that's showering and putting on clothes, if it's reading a book, if it's drinking tea, if it's meal prep, if it's scrolling through your Instagram, it's all about finding time for yourself in the morning. And so while I haven't always been successful about waking up at 5 a.m., I think it's at least been nice. Like there's a private Facebook group where everyone kind of shares what they've done in the morning, how they've used their time. And I think it's just been helpful to get me a little bit more mindful around setting boundaries, because what I would do, like whenever I'd wake up early, like, and again, I did this today, so I'm not always the best, is it's just easy to just go straight into work. Like, oh, I'm up at 7, like I have all these things to do. But I think if you don't set the boundaries, it just, and I think one thing that helped when we were in the office, at least at Unilever, is we had shuttles. So like I had to leave, like I didn't care what we were doing at 5:30. I was like, if I don't catch the shuttle, I'm not about to take a $60 cab ride back home. So it was either the 5:30 or the 6:30 shuttle. And so it really forced you to, even if it was only for 30 minutes, like shut things down. Whereas I think working from home, it's just harder to get that time back for yourself.
I mean, shout out to Alyssa. Everyone who's those. There's the book, The 5 a.m. Club, which I too have tried, and I'm a morning person, but like, 5 a.m. is a little bit different than 6 a.m. and so I hear you in that struggle, but shout out to you having team members that are really like, pushing and inspiring you guys. I love that. Erin, what about you?
Yes, I'm the opposite. I'm not a morning person. Don't think 5 a.m. would work for me.
I'm not either.
But
I don't know why I signed up for this.
But I think what I've been doing is I've been trying to limit like screen time. Just like I think that last year I spent a lot of time on the news, a lot of time on digital, a lot of time like in front of my computer. So when the weather was nice, in the summer, like I would take a walk every day after work, like between like 5, 6, 7, and I would literally like leave my phone at home and like not even have access to it, so that I could really unplug and unwind, which was super great. And like my manager even knew, he's like, "Oh, I think I texted you. I think you're on your walk." So it was like really great to
Great.
just, yeah, because I'm like, otherwise he would just be texting me all day. And I would be responding right away. And so
Can we
it was
do a
great
walk,
to just,
Erin? Can we do a social distance walk?
yeah, can we? Well, now the weather isn't as great, so it's been a little bit harder. I can't do like, I'm on the East Coast and I can't like be walking in the winter. Just doesn't work for me. So it's been a little bit harder. But I've been doing actually like virtual like fitness classes with my 2 cousins. So one of my cousins is like a fitness trainer, so she's like really nice, giving us like free kind of like training every day. And we only do like 30 minutes actually, so it's not that long. But we kind of commit to it, and it's also a time for us to just like catch up personally. So that's been nice too. But I would say like those are the things that I'm looking forward to when the weather gets warmer. Is like hopefully I can go back to doing something outdoors, so that I'm not like at home just like scrolling on my phone, or like going between like my phone, computer, and TV. It's just too much screen time. And then I've also tried to make a commitment to read more books this year. So I'm working on doing that as well.
Oh, I love that. I'm like inviting myself. I'm going to come be a fly on the wall for research, and then I'll come to your fitness class.
Let's do
And
it.
you do that too. And then,
Yeah, come through.
form a book club. Like,
I know. I want to join the book club.
Yeah, let's do it. I've actually been thinking about like creating one or joining one. So
Please, I'd love that. I need to be more I'm in one actually, but it's forcing me to again take the time out, which is only more beneficial to me and showing up in my work. So I'm all about it. Okay, I'm going to shift a little bit to questions. We have some questions from the audience. One person's asking, they're curious to know if the Unilever team is seeing shifts to e-commerce and if the brand teams are integrating digital media efforts and leveraging these for shopper performance, or are they 2 completely separate divisions? That could be for either one of you, actually.
So I think overall, like e-commerce has been booming because of COVID. So like they always do these monthly town halls where they share performance. I'm like, I wish I was the e-com lead, because she is just getting just like crazy growth. So it's a great time to be in her position, because her just lots of growth there. And yes, I think what we do on digital, we also try to do for shopper. Even for example, I mean, this for Crown Act, it's a little bit different because it's not a product, but Walmart has been very engaged with our initiatives there, wanting to highlight, like even on Crown Day, we did a takeover on Walmart.com. They're very much, I actually might even need to leave this a couple of minutes early because I'm supposed to be speaking with Walmart, but they're very engaged on the purpose initiatives we're doing, not only from an in-store perspective, but also digital. And then we have a whole shopper marketing team that brings to life our campaigns from a shopper lens. So whether that's shopper specific influencers, doing certain things to drive to retailers. And then sometimes we have innovations that are retailer specific. So let's say we have a Walmart exclusive. In those instances, we'll really make sure we lean on shopper marketing and e-commerce to drive our initiatives versus maybe doing something on a national level.
Great answer. Another question actually has to do with influencers. What role does influencers play in your overall marketing mix? Are they upper funnel, middle funnel, or lower funnel across your efforts? I could definitely answer for both.
Do you want me to take that one, or do you want to?
Go ahead, Erin.
So again, I think it depends on what type of campaign it is. So I work with influencers both on new product innovation. So using them, and again, for something like Amplified Textures, a brand like Dove, I think a Black woman might say, I don't know if this is for my hair type. There's that barrier when it comes to trust. They might not think it's going to work. So influencers for us were very, very important, not only from like an upper funnel perspective to get awareness, but also to show that the product works and showing that end benefit. So definitely think it kind of across upper engagement awareness, every step of the way we use influencers. And then also I've seen really, really impactful work with what we're doing on the Crown Act. So we use our influencers to help raise awareness around the Crown Act. We had a number of Black female influencers this year. We asked them to share personal stories around hair discrimination, when, whether that's being on set. I was right before this call actually reading an article around women in Hollywood and not being able to find hairdressers, Black hairdressers who can do their hair properly. But influencers are definitely something that we use pretty much every step of the way.
Every step of the way. That's interesting. I love that. And to think about Hollywood, I'm always like I think all of Shonda Rhimes' cast I think she has dedicated Black hairstylists because their hair is always in tip top shape. To think about another question, what is the through line between your roles as part of the larger Unilever family? The company has been able to achieve consistency in its consumer perspective over time. Are there certain brand values that remain core no matter which brand division you might be in? That's an interesting question. I think, Aiden, you kind of spoke to that a bit.
Yeah, I can speak to that. So as Unilever, we definitely have like kind of core key pillars. So purpose is really important to all of our brands. So each brand will have its own purpose, right? So for Dove, as Erin mentioned, it's focused on hair discrimination. For SheaMoisture, it's really focusing on like the African American community and building that entrepreneurship gap. So each of our brands have their own kind of like personal purpose that makes sense for the brand depending on the category that it is and what they sell and who their consumers are. Purpose is really important. And then I would say that we have some overall key pillars. So e-com is really important to us as well. So it's really thinking through, okay, all of our brands need to be on e-commerce. How can we grow our business on e-commerce? Innovation is also really important. So, we love to innovate. We have a ton of products. So how are we innovating and taking into account the latest trends, the latest, technology and consumer insights to make sure that we are creating products for all of our consumers. So I would say there's definitely some core values that Unilever has across all of its brands, and then we kind of localize it or make it make sense for our brands individually.
Love that. This is my own question. I want to know, what are your guys' predictions for hair and beauty as a category this year? And you can even think too. I know Erin's over here planning 2022, she said. So.
I'm like, I can't tell you my predictions. You guys are going to steal those.
Maybe thinking about the consumer perspective, and we touched on it a bit. I'm curious to know what you guys are thinking or predicting.
So this isn't really specific to hair, and I wouldn't say this is like some crazy new trend. But for Unilever, it was a new space this year. So prior to 2020, we didn't sell hand sanitizers, and that has been something where we have seen tremendous growth. Like we basically had a whole bunch of brands who were like, this is clearly a need. So Suave came out with hand sanitizers. And so again, this isn't hair and it's nothing crazy new, especially given 2020. I think everyone probably is stacked up with hand sanitizers, but I'm curious to see how, from a Unilever perspective, how we continue to develop this. Like we have new teams in place that are focused on hand sanitizers and really looking at that as an innovation space. I think we'll probably see more around, how do you bring premiumization to this category? How do you bring beauty cues to hand sanitizer? How do you create mass sanitizers that smell good, different colors, just different sensorials? So I think this is something that will be a space that's going to continue to expand. So while it's not the sexiest, I'm curious to see Unilever's take on this moving forward.
I agree. There goes Chris dropping in.
I feel like I have to apologize for my presence now. By the way, ladies, just so you know, there's a new format now. It didn't used to be this intrusive, so I'm getting used to it too. But if you have something else you guys need to talk about, please carry on for a moment or two.
I just want to know, what are you guys looking forward to end it? But eat it and definitely go with what you were saying just now.
Oh, sorry, I was going to add one point to kind of what Erin talked about, and maybe I can include this with what I'm also looking forward to. I think that consumers are going to continue to want more from brands. They're going to want accountability. They're going to focus on sustainability. They're going to want us to really, put our money where our mouth is. I think that's definitely going to continue. So we have to be really, really, and they have to be wowed, like beyond kind of traditional marketing. So, yes, the product can work and it can be at an amazing price point. Like that's no longer enough to kind of be competitive in the market. So I think that that's going to continue to be important moving forward. One of the things that I'm looking forward to is, I have to say, hopefully, travel opens back up in a safe way and I can start, being on a plane once a month like I used to be. Definitely missing some of those, destinations that I was going to.
I love that. I'm traveling to, inviting myself again. Here I go. Go ahead, Erin.
So from a professional standpoint, we have a campaign that we're going to be launching this summer around June, July time for the Crown Act that I'm really, really excited about. I think it's going to resonate, be really strong. So very excited about that. From a personal standpoint, I'm excited for the summer. I feel like we still aren't going to be back in the office. I think I'm figuring out how I could probably work this work from home thing a little bit better. Like I was working nonstop this summer. I'm like, this one coming up, I'm going to do it differently. And then I'm also excited that my mom got her first shot of the vaccine. I spent a lot of time with her this summer and she was driving me crazy, naturally so with COVID. So I'm excited about spending more time with her this summer and some of that nervousness being reduced with her getting a shot and everything. So
good luck and congrats, all the positive vibes to you guys in that. Thank you so much again for being a part of this. We love this conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed talking to you guys, so we appreciate you being part of it.
Thank you. This was great.
Thanks, Tiffanie.
No problem.
Thanks so much, Eden and Erin. Fantastic session. Tiffanie, as always, you are I'll tell you guys, every single time Tiffanie brings the heat. She brings the best sessions and is so good at this.